Hello there friends and welcome. For today's BG3 guide we have at last my Necromancer Wizard build that works for both your main character or also GALE, the default wizard companion. And you'll be a true Lord of the Dead. Just look at how many minions we have, most of which are undead. We have zombie mushrooms, ghouls, flying ghouls, mummies, and also skeleton snipers together with a hidden shadow away here. Not counting all of our other normal non-undead summons too, to further enhance our Minionmancer playstyle. And of course, while not all of these summons are coming from the same character, just from GALE alone, my Necromancer, I have more than 10, around 15, 11 of which are undead. And as you can see, unlike many other cRPGs and RPGs, Baldur's Gate 3 does have the support for both the Summoner and Necromancer playstyles. Some battles might take long because of how many characters you are controlling at the same time, but if you enjoy being a Necromancer, it can be very fun too. And quite efficient, as the enemies will barely get to do anything before being completely drowned by your summon and undead army. So without further ado, let us get into our Necromancer guide. First, I want to cover the unique benefits of the Necromancy Wizard subclass. After all, it's a core part of our build, right? Your level 2 abilities are, I'm afraid, quite underwhelming, especially when compared to Symbiotic Entity from the Spore Druid Necromancer. It's called Grim Harvest. Once per turn, whenever you kill the enemy with a leveled spell, so no cantrips I'm afraid, you'll regain hit points equal to twice the spell slot level used, 3 times if it's a necromancy spell. Okay, but there's barely any necromancy spells for damage in the game, and they are rather subpar compared to other spells. Also, because this is just a hit point restoration ability, it's not temporary hit points, you kinda need to lose hit points first for it to work. I just don't think it's that useful. Unfortunately, the real power of Necromancer only comes at level 6+. It's just the way it is. Before that, you'll be mostly a normal wizard, which frankly is good enough on its own anyways. Now, level 6 is when you finally get amazing Necromancer powers. You'll get the Animate Dead spell for free, but you can also learn it if you want at level 5. But most importantly, first, Undead Thralls. Whenever you use Animate Dead, you'll get to summon an extra Undead for free. For example, by default at level 5, Animate Dead grants you either 1 skeleton or 1 zombie. With this, it's 2. At level 7, when upcast as a level 4 spell, it's 3 or 4 with our Necromancer ability. Quite handy. Second, you'll also improve the power of your Undead. The ones created from Animate Dead will have first additional hit points equal to your wizard level, so a maximum of +12, together with your proficiency bonus added to their damage, quite handy too, especially for the ranged skeletons, usually around +3 at max level, except when you have like 10+ undead summons from your Necromancer alone, it adds up, right? The good thing is, by virtue of getting this for free, you won't have to prepare it on your spellbook, which frees a slot for something else. At level 10 you get your last Necro unique ability, and I'm afraid it's also rather subpar, like the first level one. Inured to Undeath. First you'll become resistant to necrotic damage, which is 50%. Okay, I guess, it's just that not many enemies in the game inflict necrotic damage, especially at this point, Act 3 usually. Lastly, your hit point total cannot be reduced. Some enemies have effects that do it, but they are super rare, like shadows, wraiths and so on. Better than nothing, but not exactly useful. But that's the way it is. The level 6 ability is definitely the best. I'd rather level 10 be something that further empowers your undead minions, right? Because after all, that's the point of being a Necromancer. And as I said, this build will work for both the main character and GALE, the companion. I want to start level 1 as the main character because, well, the rest of the build progression is mostly the same, right? After all, you can almost fully respec companions. When it comes to race, human is actually my preferred choice for a wizard. For once, right? Even if humans aren't the best race, as they were in the previous editions of D&D and Pathfinder, they're still quite handy for a wizard or caster because, through the Civil Militia racial passive, you'll get both light armor and shield proficiency for free, which means you can also cast spells under these types of armor without any penalty. It can help a lot early game, because the enemy's ranged AI, especially on Tactician, is smart enough to target your backline, including frail wizards. Light armor and shields means you'll have more AC, and you can still keep a ranged weapon or attack with spells while still benefiting from both, including the shield. The increased shield carrying capacity and an extra proficiency skill is great too. Anyways, shields are important because there's a particular shield in the game that will increase your spell DC by a further +1 that you cannot get anywhere else. So in a way, if you want the absolute max DC possible, it's not necessary, but it can be fun to have, you need shield proficiency. For the best spells and cantrips, please remember that I already have a best spells guide you can check to the side here or down below, where I explain each of the best spells in depth. For now, let's keep it simple and short, right? For cantrips, Firebolt is the best for damage. Blade Ward can be amazing as a way of pre-buffing your character so you take half damage even from ranged attacks. You can do it during battle too, but it's better when pre-buffed. Right before battle starts, of course. The other is up to you. I like Light because it can help you in a lot of situations, not just for illumination. As far as spells, we don't need Mage Armor because we already have Light Armor proficiency. Be sure to pick Sleep, the best early crowd control, together with Fog Cloud, Find Familiar, the Raven is amazing. False Life is better left for later levels. Long Strider is an absolute must-have because it can be cast an infinite amount of times out of battle. You want everyone buff with this, always including summons. And Chromatic Orb can help deal summon elemental damage and create elemental surfaces. The last pick is up to you. Shield can help a lot as a reaction to avoid hits. As far as your stats, it's kinda the same for most casters in this game. 16 or 17 intelligence, as it's your most important casting stat as a wizard. Dump strength is completely unnecessary. Dump charisma too. Then go for 16 dexterity, which can help a lot, especially for initiative, because you want to get crowd control spells going fast before the enemies can react. 14 constitution is more than enough, just to be safe, hit points wise. And something you can do is start with 15 constitution, depending on what feat you want to pick. If you want proficiency with constitution saving throws, then go with 15 constitution. Otherwise, if you'd rather less hit points but advantage only on concentration checks, leave it at 14. 17 intelligence is only if you're playing as the main character, right? Because you can accept the Hag's Gift during Act 1 for a +1, so that even at level 4 it will become 20, the max. The rest of the points don't matter. Charisma can help a bit just for dialogue checks if you wanna make them with the main character. As far as skill points, Arcana is the must-have. There's a lot of Arcana checks in the game, and I find Investigation quite good too. Meanwhile, your background will depend on what other skills you want to add to your character. For example, Noble will provide both History and Persuasion, which is the best pick for dialogue checks, I believe. Assuming you want to make them as your main character, of course. Because you have high dexterity, you can also go with something like Charlatan for sleight of hand proficiency, so you can unlock chests and disarm traps. From the second level onwards, we'll continue progression as Gale, right? Because it's essentially the same. Your ability scores will even be the same as well. The only difference is unless you want to accept the Hag's Gift with Gale, you should start with 16 instead of 17 intelligence. And of course, don't forget to pick Necromancy at level 2, which I do happen to find quite thematic and appropriate for Gale too, as a story character. After all, he does seem to enjoy Forbidden Power, doesn't he? For level 3, definitely Cloud of Daggers first. I was perhaps a bit harsh on it in my best spells guide, because I find the druid equivalents on the same level to be better, but for a wizard or sorcerer, this is probably the best early spell pick. It's a persistent spell, right, that will last for 10 turns. The cloud itself does a lot of damage early on, 4 to 16 without a saving throw. Just remember, you cannot move the cloud after casting it, so be sure to cast it on a choke point, or push and shove enemies back into it if they move away. Together with Misty Step, also a must-have, cast as a bonus action, lets you teleport pretty much everywhere. Pick any cantrip you want at level 4, like Light for example. And for more spells, Scorching Ray can become a great source of single target damage eventually. The same for Hold Person when it comes to crowd control, but it takes a while to get really good, because it's only one target at level 2. You get more when you upcast it as a higher spell level though. And at the very least, Hold is extremely strong, it's the same as Paralyzation, all attacks against the enemy will hit, and they are critical hits too. Busted good, right? Now for the feat, regardless of if Gale or your main character, you definitely want ability improvement, and then 2 points into intelligence. As any type of caster, you always want to maximize your spell DC, to make them harder to resist, and increasing intelligence for a wizard is the way to go. The only difference is, if you were playing the main character and started with 17 intelligence, you could already have 20 at this point, right, from accepting the Hag's Gift for a further +1. For level 5 we get the highly awaited level 3 spells, starting of course with Animate Dead, because after all we are a Necromancer, right? It only summons a single creature at this point, but it will soon become way better with each subsequent spell level. While it is true that Necromancers get this for free at level 6, I'd rather have it now, right? Because come on, we are the Necromancer build. We want our skellies and zombies as early as possible, plus a wizard can always learn more spells from scrolls anyways. And please remember that as far as descriptions of each undead summons, I already have a best summons guide you can check to the side here, where I cover all of the summons in the game in depth, undead and otherwise. Don't forget that for undead spells at least, you need a corpse to actually spawn the summon, right? But on Act 2, you can find a certain area where you get to cast the skeletons for free, that is, without a corpse, you still use a spell slot of course, closest to the mausoleum waypoint. Lastly, remember you can always just pick up corpses and drop them close together, as to cast your spells with multiple summons easier, right? Besides that, slow to me is the must-have. I love how easy it is to target multiple enemies with this, even if they are surrounding you and far away from each other, without friendly fire, and the slow effect is quite powerful too. A must-have to ensure your summons will have good 2-hit chances against enemies even on Tactician mode. At level 6 we at last get our highly awaited Necro powers for better summons and more of them too. And for spells, Counterspell is a must-have. The biggest danger to any summoner party, because of how many summons you have together, is enemy area of effect spells, right? With Counterspell we can avoid that to prevent our summons from blowing up, of course. You can then pick anything else you want. There's something to be said about Stinking Cloud, because Undead should by default be immune to it. But trust me, just Slow and Counterspell are already amazing. You can also pick Hypnotic Pattern or Haste if you prefer. For level 7, what you want is first Conjure Minor Elemental. It's not an undead summon, but it's another summon, 2 even, because you can conjure 2 mud methods, and they are extremely powerful, once again for debuffing the enemy's armor class, to help your summons hit. For the second level 4 spell, I would honestly only bother up casting Slow for more casts, or Hold Person for 2 enemies at once at this point. But you'll mostly just spend them with Conjure Minor Elemental and Animate Dead for triple 4 summons even with a Necromancer anyways. You'll run out of them fast. So go with anything else you want. Wall of Fire for example can be quite helpful. Any other spells you want at level 8. And for your second feat, this is going to depend if main character or Gale. For Gale, because he still needs to maximize his intelligence due to the lack of the Hag's Gift, that's what you should do now. For the main character, who already has 20 intelligence at this point, I would personally go with Resilient, which is why we started with 15 Constitution, to get more hit points, and of course, proficiency in Constitution saving throws, as to not be disrupted when it comes to concentration spellcasting checks so often. If you get disrupted, the effect will disappear and you'll have to do it again. For level 5 spells, Conjure Elemental is the must-have. The elementals are extremely strong, and remember you can just keep on stacking your summons so long as they are from different abilities per character. Cloud Kill has synergy with the undead summons because they are immune to poison. Also with the Mind Flayer Code the weak power, it's just that, well, the damage itself is not going to be that amazing, but at the very least it's persistent, right? And you can keep moving the cloud around. As I said, it has synergy with a Necro run, but it's up to you if you want to cast it or not. After all, Hold Person, for example, should now hit up to 3 targets. Telekinesis can be quite fun too, but there's some gear that lets you cast it anyways. At level 10 we get a rather wimpy Necro power, any other cantrip too, and any other spell. For level 11, for level 6 spells, we do get Create Undead, but at this point you can also get a ring that does the same. Since you have limited spell slots, I'd rather cast it from the ring. Or you can leave it for another character so you can get more mummies and still cast it as your Necromancer. It's up to you. Besides that, you'll want to upcast the Conjure Elemental spell we got at level 5 to level 6 for even stronger elementals. Globe of Invulnerability can be quite helpful as far as making allies immune to damage, including a lot of your summon party, but it doesn't do much outside of that, at least not as far as damage and crowd control. And honestly, for a Necromancer, that's mostly it. Eye Bite has some synergy with the Mummy from Create Undead, because you'll get an ability to inflict fear per round pretty much forever, but it does require concentration and only hits one enemy per turn. Pick whatever other spells you want at 12. Just don't bother with Circle of Death because it's quite disappointing, despite being necromancy. Don't let the name fool you. As far as your last feat, for Gale it's time to get Resilient and Constitution. Late, but it's still great. For the main character who already got this feat at level 8, well, you can get Warcaster now, so that you have both proficiency and advantage on concentration checks, which means you're pretty much never gonna fail, no matter how many attacks you take. Alert can help too, because it will ensure you always act first, even usually against bosses too, for that nice Alpha Strike crowd control effect. And that's honestly pretty much it. Even Lucky can help you avoid hits if you want. Alright, now let us cover gear for our Necromancer Wizard. A lot of the choices here are similar to some of my other casters because, well, after all, you're still a caster and you still want high DC together with your summons. For the helmet, the Hood of the Weave is the ultimate for +2 to DC and attack rolls. For the earlier acts, including Act 1, be sure to go with the Fistbreaker Helm, for half the effect but also +1 to initiative. The Circle of Bone is also quite powerful for a Necromancer, but ideally I would leave this for another character, right? First, because you can, for example, equip it on a melee, so they get a casting of Animate Death. You already have that anyways. But most importantly is because it works as an aura surrounding your character, right? So it doesn't have to be equipped on your Necromancer themselves. The benefit is highly powerful. It will grant all undead allies in a rather big aura around you resistance to physical damage, that is 50% only, taken from all physical strikes. Melee and ranged, what's not to love, right? Cloaks are rather rare in this game, I'm afraid, but ultimately you want the Cloak of the Weave for +1 to save DC and attack rolls. And by the way, these types of gear that increase DC all stack with each other, so you can achieve enormous DC, even late game on Tactician. There's not any other decent enough early cloak for a spellcaster like a Necromancer, but I'm all up for suggestions if you have any. For armor, as a human wizard, you do get light armor and shield proficiency from the Civil Militia ability. Ultimately just something like the Armor of Landfall for decent enough armor class and +1 to spell DC. But before you can just use robes that increase DC, I believe the Proclity Sparks Wall should be the earliest of them all. For gloves, Hell Dusk just for +1 to DC ultimately. There's also the Netherstone gloves, both from Act 3 quests. But for the earlier parts of the game, including Act 1, I really enjoy the gloves of Missile Snaring, right? Because as a reaction, you can reduce one ranged attack by half or even to 0, which can help a lot a frail wizard survive early on. For boots, I don't think there are that many useful for this build, but I'm all up for suggestions. It's just that most of the great boots are medium armor, which we do not have proficiency for. I just have the Boots of Speed here because of its Click Heals ability, and you can at least run away or close the distance to enemies, but of course as a wizard you can just use the Misty Step spell to teleport. For amulets, ultimately Amulet of the Devout for the highest spell DC increase possible +2, but it's only Act 3. Now there's two other amulets that can be acquired earlier and are great choices as well. First, the Spellcrux Amulet, because it has the ability to restore any spell slot, including level 6 slots, once per long rest. Second, the Pearl of Power Amulet from the Myconid Colony. It has a similar effect to Spellcrux, but is limited to level 3 spells. Still amazing when you consider how busted level 3 spells are, right? Slow, Haste, Counterspell, Hypnotic Pattern, Fireball, and so on. Earlier, I would just go with the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation, right? For bonus damage on our Firebolt cantrip. For rings, the Ring of Mental Inhibition is one of my favorites. Whenever an enemy fails against your spells and it can hit multiple targets, for example from let's say slow, they'll gain Mental Fatigue for 2 turns, which further reduces their Wisdom, Intelligence, and Charisma, which makes it even easier to proc other crowd control effects on them. The Crypt Lord ring can be very fun too for a free use of Create Undead. This way, we can get the Mummy summon for free, because by default it's a level 6 spell slot, which are rather limited in this game. After all, you only have one, even at level 12, the cap so far. There's also the Shapeshifter's Bone Ring, and the Ring of Arcane Synergy, but it does require you to attack the enemy with a weapon after dealing damage with a cantrip for the effect to actually be worth it. Now let's discover weapons and shields. I want to get started with a rather unique weapon called the Shadow Lantern, because it does grant you a special summon that cannot be acquired otherwise. The Shadow that you'll see here, well, more like don't see, but it works in combat and so on. This item comes from Act 2 in a quest that I believe has to be started by GALE himself. Another reason I have him as a Necromancer. The thing is, if you remove the lantern from your weapon slot, well, the shadow disappears, right? So it can be somewhat annoying because ideally, for the main hand slot as a caster, you'll want staffs that increase your spell DC, right? Such as Malphur's staff, also the first one you can find, I believe. So it's up to you, +1 DC or the Shadow Summon. Ultimately, you of course want the legendary staff, Marco Hexgear. After all, it's +1 DC together with the best part, a free spell recharge, because you can use this ability to cast a spell for free, mostly level 6 spells, and a very nice passive that will increase the damage of any element, including poison for a Necromancer, not necrotic however. This way we have 1 level 6 spell slot by default, 2 with the staff, and 3 with the Spellcrux amulet. Even an extra 1 from the Illithid power free cast. 4 total level 6 spell slots instead of just 1. Definitely the way to go, right? Now don't forget, Falar Aluve is also an ultimate weapon for any summoner party because of its unique melody ability. If you choose the Sing variant, all of the nearby summons will be buffed for 5 whole turns with an effect that's the same as Bless. Of course, it's amazing to increase their chances of hitting the enemy, especially as you can't really target every single summon you have with Bless otherwise. But because it works based on an aura, leave it to another party member, right? Especially, let's say Shadowheart as a War Domain Cleric, the best Cleric subclass for a Summoner and Necromancer party. As this way she can also buff all summons with the highly useful Crusader's Mantle spell for higher damage on hit. As for shields, one of the reasons I like going with human is for shield proficiency for free. This way we can equip Catheric's shield, which is very rare in that it provides an extra +1 to both spell save, DC and spell attack rolls, something you cannot get from any other shield I believe. So if you really wanna max out DC, you need this shield. Now just as a final note, when it comes to spells, you can get 2 very unique ones for your Necromancer. The first and the best one is called Danse Macabre, although I'm pretty sure other characters should also be able to learn this. It's quite amazing in that it summons 6 entire ghouls at once. The normal melee ghouls, so these guys here. The best part is it will work with your Undead Throw ability from Necromancer Wizard for higher hit points and higher damage. And this way you can combine both 6 ghouls together with 4 flying ghouls on the same character. Otherwise you'll have to choose between one of them only. Besides that, your Necromancer can amusingly enough also summon an angel, despite it not fitting at all, from the special Sides of the Silly Summon Deva ability, which you get from Sorcerer's Sundries at Act 3, the same place where you upgrade your Necromancy of Thay book from Chapter 1 to summon the Danse Macabre ghouls. Now, as I've explained before, if you want a true army of the dead with as many necro summons as possible, it's not just about having a single character as a Necromancer, right? You want multiple. Ideally, 1 Necromancer Wizard such as GALE, 1 War Priest Cleric like Shadowheart to further boost summons, plus she gets some undead of her own, together with a Circle of the Spores Druid, I have a Steron here as one, ideally 2 even like the main character, or you can also go with a Necromancer for the MC. Spell Druid can help a lot because it's the only way to get the friendly and very fun fungal zombie summons, to combine of course with your Skellies or other zombies. Well, alright friends, so this was it from my Necromancer guide, together with Necro GEAR and main character builds. If you found it useful, as always, please remember to like, subscribe and consider becoming a channel member if you can. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends.